We often judge people based on appearances, even though we all know the saying, never judge a book by its cover. Unfortunately, some people who happen to have a lot of money consider themselves better than those less fortunate and will treat them with contempt just because of their lower social status. Susan was one such rich girl who looked down on others if they didn't have money. She often drove her fancy car to a newspaper kiosk to buy a horoscope, which she had been doing for years. The horoscopes always appeared to come true, and it became a habit to buy one every week. One day, she accidentally passed the kiosk and had to park further away than normal. She walked with her fancy heels through an unfamiliar neighborhood filled with ordinary people. Along the way, she came across a woman in shabby clothes sitting behind a makeshift counter with common flowers for sale. Susan looked at the woman with contempt, thinking, why would anyone waste money on such shabby flowers from a shabby woman when they could buy professional bouquets from an actual shop? Then she passed on by. Next, she saw a man who was also dressed poorly, wearing a worn jacket and boots. He was sitting on the ground selling cucumbers. Susan thought to herself, who knows where these cucumbers came from? He probably stole them from somewhere or even taken them from the garbage. Why would anyone buy these when they could get clean ones from a grocery store? Susan looked down on these people and wondered how they were even allowed to be there. She thought, if I were in charge, I'd gather them all up and have them taken away. Without them, our city would look much more beautiful. Susan continued to the kiosk where she bought her horoscope and turned around to leave. As she did so, her gaze fell upon a handsome man. She thought to herself, wow, what a good-looking man. He must be well off. He dresses so nicely and clearly takes care of himself. I wonder if he is single. It's too bad I left the kiosk so quickly, or we could have met. Susan was headed back to her car when she realized that she didn't have her wallet. She immediately thought of the two beggars and assumed one of them must have pickpocketed her while she was admiring the man. She immediately hurried back to accuse the beggars and reprimand them for stealing from respectable citizens. She screamed at them rudely, demanding them to return her wallet and threatening to call the police. She tossed over the woman's flowers and scattered the man's cucumbers everywhere. A nearby policeman heard the shouts and approached the scene, trying to understand what had happened. Susan was screaming like crazy, and it was difficult to understand her, so the officer asked every witness to come to the police station to give their account of the situation. He gathered the woman who had the flowers, the man with the cucumbers, the well-dressed man, and even the salesman from the kiosk. Susan refused to ride with the thieves and insisted that she drive herself to the station. When Susan arrived at the police station, she was told that her wallet had been found and that it would be returned to her after she gave her statement and filled out paperwork. As the poor woman and man were brought in, Susan looked at them with indignation and yelled at the officer that they should be put away so they could no longer bother upstanding citizens. They sat in silence and didn't look at Susan. But then the police officer said something that took Susan by surprise. He said that these two had nothing to do with the theft. They didn't take her wallet, but actually assisted in finding out who did. They actually witnessed the theft and reported it to the police. Susan was a little embarrassed. She asked, but then why didn't they tell me about it right away? Susan continued looking at them with obvious contempt, even after learning that they were innocent. The officer replied that they simply didn't have a chance, as she was screaming so loudly. Then Susan guessed, then the seller at the kiosk must be the culprit. I should have known by the way he chatted me up to distract me. How could he think I wouldn't come back for it? But it turned out that the kiosk seller didn't have anything to do with it either. It was at that time that the man Susan had admired was brought in. Susan thought to herself, there's no way he could be the thief. He looks too handsome and smart to be a criminal. But she was very wrong. The man was a repeat offender who had just recently been released from prison for theft. He had even earned the nickname Charming for his appearance and demeanor, which he used to take advantage of rich women. We don't know whether Susan learned a lesson from this or not, whether she still treats other people with contempt just because they are different, but we sure hope she tries at least a little harder to understand others now. If you enjoyed this story, click like, write your comments, subscribe to the channel, and do not forget about the bell so as not to miss new videos on our channel.